news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making. Presented as a public service by the Narragansett Electric Company, part of the New England electric system.
West Branch, Iowa, birthplace of Herbert Hoover, Main Street puts on banners and bunting as the 30th President of the United States returns on his 80th birthday. His step is still steady despite his 80 years. The two-room white frame cottage where he was born is as he left it, an orphan of 9. He sees pictures of his blacksmith father and schoolteacher mother. The simple furnishings recall his humble childhood. Thousands come to the party, complete with cake, paying homage to the blacksmith's boy who became president, a living lesson of democracy in America. The president of a foreign land, Syngman Rhee of Korea, visits Harry Truman, America's 32nd president. Rhee tenders the former chief executive the everlasting gratitude of his people for American aid in fighting communism. Korea, says Syngman Rhee, will never forget. In Washington, the 83rd Congress passes into history. Members of the House of Representatives say goodbye to congressional colleagues. Meanwhile, House page boys give Speaker Joe Martin a special send-off. With a handshake, Republican leader Noland and Democratic leader Johnson end Senate debate. Vice President Nixon initials the final bills. Flying to Denver with Mrs. Eisenhower, America's 33rd president joins Congress in taking a vacation. At Lowry Air Force Base, General Sprague welcomes the chief executive. Despite his holiday tie, it's a working vacation for President Eisenhower. Man completes nature's facelifting at Niagara Falls. Dynamite is placed at Prospect Point, undermined by the spectacular rockfall reported in last month's news magazine. A lone tree, since fallen, clings precariously by its roots as the preparations are completed and the workmen warn the crowds away before the first blast is set off. A second blast. A man-made change in the face of mighty Niagara. Rolling out on the road is a revolutionary new vehicle, the 5-ton Rhino, a sight to startle the soul of any motorist. The Rhino's new type wheels give such a grip that it won't tip on hills. The wheels also help it plow through underbrush like a tank, although its engine is no more powerful than an automobile's. Water is no barrier. Where it's shallow, the wheels do the work. In deeper, it floats, propelled by a jet arrangement. The more the wheels sink in, the greater the grip. Churning through mud like a happy rhinoceros, the revolutionary Rhino. The Army's newest wonder on wheels is called Herman, an experimental device for exploding landmines. Resembling a farm disc harrow, it can be maneuvered easily when hooked to the front of a tank. Does it work? Watch. With its steel claws, Herman sweeps a battlefield path of safety. These are the first motion pictures ever made of a pilgrimage to Mecca, the sacred Muslim journey that many of us had heard about, the mystic rite that for 1,000 years has beckoned millions of Mohammedans to the birthplace of their religion. Within a city of tents springs up, many colorfully decorated. An archway frames Mecca, photographed by a Muslim cameraman, for unbelievers are forbidden to enter. The pilgrims, many aged and some unable to walk, are fulfilling the call of their faith that they make at least one journey to Mecca in their lifetime. In the heart of the mysterious city stands the massive black mosque where Muhammad once preached. It is the most sacred place of worship in the religion he founded in the 7th century, and which now has more than 500 million followers. The spired city welcomes almost 200,000 pilgrims every year, all coming to dedicate anew their faith, filling the mosque called the Kaaba. They kiss a black stone said to have been given Abraham by the angel Gabriel. The ceremony reaches its climax as the Muslims mill past a white stone pillar, throwing 7 pebbles at the devil in the name of their God, Allah. An ages-old act of worship against a background of Eastern majesty. Craftsman works with skill and care at an intricate art 5,000 years old, the art of creating mosaics. Guided by his original design, he selects bits of stone, breaking them into small chips. Marble is frequently used, also colored glass or enamel. The chips are then embedded in a cement, each chip carefully placed to follow the master design. As the artist places by hand each of the thousands of individual chips, he slowly creates a mosaic. Mosaic comes from the Latin, and it was in ancient Rome that mosaic art flourished. Early Christians adopted it for religious art because of the resplendent colors of the little chips. From churches in Ravenna, Italy, come careful copies of famous mosaics, like this sensitive portrait of an early saint. Each stone chip plays its part in the art of the mosaic, which, like the durable stones that make it, has weathered the test of time.
A spectacular sight in the sky is the Scorpion, America's most powerful jet interceptor. Its wingtip pods carry a deadly sting, high-powered rockets. A flood of rockets leaves one wing pod in this slow-motion demonstration of firepower. Here's how the Scorpion's pilot sees it as the rockets burst, riddling an area bigger than a football field. Carrying 104 rockets, any one of which can destroy a bomber, the Scorpion is the Air Force's most heavily armed interceptor. A pilot and radar man can fly it in any weather, guarding the American sky. A strange sight is the helicopter that carries its own hangar. Someone just attaches the sling and there she goes, the first time an aircraft has flown off with its hangar. This demonstration by the Marine Corps shows how lightweight structures can be flown quickly to the front lines if needed. The hangar framework is made of extruded magnesium girders, a type of shelter that may eventually replace the centuries-old tent. The hangar is easily landed, after which the copter flies off to land itself. There is plenty of room. In use, a plastic canopy covers the framework hangar, a revolutionary military development. To abandon ship in the sky, the pilot is catapulted out, seat and all. A pull of the escape ring explodes a cartridge driving the seat from the bomber. At the proper moment, a timing device separates jumper from seat. It's all automatic, a fantastic sight in the sky. When he bailed out, he was traveling 500 miles an hour. Having slowed down, his automatic parachute opens and it's a happy landing. In this air age, when man is striving to go faster and faster, here's a really new invention, a plane that will go slower and slower. These wing slats let the Helio Courier lope aloft at 30 miles an hour. Its amazing range is from 25 to 160. Past the George Washington Bridge in New York, the Helio Courier cruises far below its top speed. The pilot cuts speed to below 30, and even the truck underneath can outdistance the slowpoke overhead. Coming in, the plane demonstrates an almost postage stamp landing, another feature of the versatile Helio Courier. The Navy's Pogo plane is making sky history. The pilot rides on his back, and here it is, the first vertical takeoff ever made by a fighter aircraft. The plane climbs straight up, can hover overhead like this, and designers say that after further tests, it will also level off and fly horizontally at more than 500 miles an hour. A tail-first landing for the Pogo, an amazing new sight in the sky. This is John Landy, who has run the mile faster than any man who ever lived. His record time of 3 minutes and 58 seconds is the latest achievement in the centuries-old duel between man and the mile. Man against the mile, a supreme test of courage, of human will, of determination. The goal had been the 4-minute mile, the dream that had through the years beckoned the world's swiftest runners. England's Walter George was fleetest of all milers in 1884. His record time, 4 minutes, 18 and 4/10 seconds. An American, Thomas Conniff, lowered George's mark in 1895 to 4 minutes, 15 and 6/10 seconds. 18 years passed before John Paul Jones, another American, bettered Conniff's time. But within 2 years, Norman Tabor had erased Jones's mark with a clocking of 4 minutes, 12 and 6/10 seconds. Tabor and Jones had pushed man closer than ever before to the miracle 4-minute mile. Finland's Paavo Nurmi took up the pursuit after World War I, blazing the way toward track's greatest goal. 1923, Paavo Nurmi, 4 minutes, 10 and 4/10 seconds, a world record for the famous Flying Finn. Crowds in Europe and America were to cheer Nurmi often as he smashed record after record. 1931, Jules Ladomègue, 4 minutes, 9 and 2/10 seconds. After 8 years with Ladomègue's record, man had moved a second nearer the 4-minute barrier. 1933, Jack Lovelock, 4 minutes, 7 and 6/10 seconds. At Princeton, New Jersey, Lovelock, born in New Zealand, educated in England, came racing down the home stretch to place his name on the roll of mile record holders. On this day in 1933, sports immortality cloaked Jack Lovelock. 1934, Glenn Cunningham, 4 minutes, 6 and 8/10 seconds. The king of America's milers had returned the world's record to the United States. Track fans hailed the courageous Cunningham, whose legs had been so badly burned as a boy that doctors said he would never walk, much less run again. But run he did, faster than any man before him. Glenn Cunningham. 1937, Sidney Wooderson, 4 minutes, 6 and 4/10 seconds. A new record and a new champion. Britain's slightly built little speedster, Sidney Wooderson. First to congratulate the British star was Walter George, his name all but forgotten in the half-century since his own record run. 1942, Haig and Andersson, 4 minutes, 6 and 2/10 seconds. Sweden's Gunder Haig and Arne Andersson, running 1-2 here, chased one another closer and closer to the 4-minute mile. Countless other world marks at many distances were to fall before Gunder Haig. (1945) Gunder Haig, 4 minutes, 1 and 4/10 seconds. With flowing strides, he moved toward the miracle mile. Though less than 2 seconds away, Haig could come no closer. The 4-minute barrier still stood like Everest, challenging and frightening. 1954, Roger Bannister, 3 minutes, 59 and 4/10 seconds. This is it. A shy 25-year-old doctor racing into sport's all-time Hall of Fame. Bannister's long legs eat up the yards, but his temples throb and his lungs suck fire as he throws all his strength into his duel against the mile until, flinging himself across the finish line, Roger Bannister collapses, man's first 4-minute miler. 1954, John Landy, 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Only 6 weeks after Bannister's historic race, the challenge that defied runners for centuries is toppled again by the 24-year-old student. It's a new record as he crosses the finish line, an unforgettable moment for John Landy. Now the stage is set for the duel of history's first 4-minute milers at the British Empire Games in Vancouver, Canada. It's a two-man race from the very start. Landy is out front and setting a torrid pace, threatening to run another miracle mile. Suddenly, Bannister, arms flapping and hair flying, pours it on, cutting Landy's lead with every jet-propelled stride. Bursting past the Australian, Bannister blazes on in a savage drive, punishing himself to the limit of human endurance in his desperate dash. Sprinting toward the finish line, he sweeps to victory in the mile of the century. His time is a spectacular 3 minutes, 58 and 8/10 seconds. Landy, too, cracks the 4-minute mark. Triumph takes its toll as Bannister sags almost unconscious. Breaking free from well-wishers, he struggles down the track toward his rival, and the two masters of the mile embrace. Bannister and Landy, they challenged sport's greatest dream and made it come true.
Mystic Seaport Marine Museum, preserving the spirit of seafaring days in early America. Nestled on the Mystic River in Connecticut, the museum is a reconstruction complete with ships of a Yankee seaport in the golden age of sail. It is a symbol of all the little ports which a century ago sent forth the iron men in wooden ships that sailed the four winds and the seven seas. With a pioneer spirit, the hardy sailors steered America toward her destiny as the greatest maritime nation in the world. Seaport Street, paved and cobbled, is lined with recreated shops like those which served the seafaring sons of Mystic. And the ships of her storied past are berthed in a serene, snug harbor. The sailing ship Joseph Conrad is one of the 19th century barks that carried the American flag to the remote corners of the watery world. Though her spars are stripped and her days of glory gone, her sight still stirs the imagination. A youth training program makes the Mystic Museum a living museum of the sea, not just a collection of maritime antiquities. Girl Scout mariners working and living aboard ship learn firsthand qualities of character that sprung from the sea traditions of the past. Soon, the girl mariners are scrambling up the rigging, perhaps not as skillfully, but with the same enthusiasm as the men who manned the Conrad 100 years ago. Mess call is as welcome today as it was then. Sharing a closely knit comradeship, the girls develop initiative, responsibility, and self-reliance, the traits that stamp the Yankee seaman and still live on at Mystic Seaport. The pulse of the Conrad and her sister ships were their sails, and naturally every port had its sailmaker, like the waterfront shop operated by Charles Mallory. Inside were sewn by hand the sails which caught the winds that drove the ships in an era when engine-driven vessels were still a dream. Tens of thousands of square feet of sturdy canvas were needed to outfit the 19th century ships. The sailmaker's stove had to hang suspended from the ceiling, clearing the floor for laying out of the sail being sewn. Also on Seaport Street is the shop of A.J. Peters, shipsmith and whalecraft manufacturer, the marine version of the village blacksmith. Still another mystic landmark, founded in 1824, is the Plymouth Cottage Company. Here, bales of hemp and manila fiber were spun into rope of all sizes. The raw yarn passed from the so-called bobbin frames into the forming plate. Drawn through the plate, the yarn was later twisted into strands. These could be tied to the waists of the men who stepped backward along the old Plymouth rope walk. Down the ramp, the men moved until the strands they carried reached the required length. A colorful collection of figureheads and ship models provide a panorama of America's maritime fleet from Presidents Monroe to McKinley. The figureheads are all that remain of their ships, long since vanished from the high seas. This one is from some nameless ship of 1820. Another recalls the brigantine Atlanta. The figureheads were painstakingly carved, many by hand. This from the Frederica, built in the 1870s. Ranging from the bizarre to the beautiful, the figureheads lend another touch of authenticity to the museum at Mystic. The rows of ship models, one of the world's finest collections, include virtually every craft afloat a century ago. The speedy clippers, the passenger packet ships, and the stout whalers like the Sunbeam, shown here in lifelike detail. Murals on the wall pay tribute to the whaling men who risked death in landing their catch. Far from the ship, lashed to a sea giant thrashing wildly for freedom, the whalers hung grimly on. And when the whale's fury was spent, the men claimed their prize. The seaport keeps alive the memory of their voyages in an even more dramatic way. The Charles Morgan, last of the wooden whaling ships, is an honored exhibit. During her 80 years of service, ending in 1920, she earned more than $2 million. On deck are the try works, the ovens over which whale blubber was boiled to try or test the oil. After the tried oil had been stored away, the scraps and impurities were fed into the fuel beds in the oven to keep the fires burning. Below are the quarters of the captain, who commanded a crew of 36 men and boys. His bed, like a hammock, could roll with the ship in rough seas. For the men of the Morgan, for all men who have gone down to the sea in ships, the far-flung oceans are frontiers which demand courage, skill, and faith. With all three as companions, Americans have sailed out to answer the call of the sea. This is one of a series on current affairs. Presented as a public service by the Narragansett Electric Company, part of the New England Electric System.